My name is Mary Frances Schneider, and this is my story, the best and the worst. The accident happened shortly after my 9th birthday on a sticky hot morning. My mother, egg-shaped in the late stages of pregnancy, pushed the lawnmower over the 6 acres of land that we called a backyard. Suddenly, the mower spit out a sharp rock. The rock crashed into my mother's leg and left a bleeding, crater-sized wound. My brother John and I heard her scream. Using our bodies as crutches, we steered our mother's shaking frame into the house and onto the family room couch. There she lay, crying. I had never seen my mother cry. Having earned our Boy and Girl Scout badges in first aid, John and I were prepared, but petrified. We looked at each other, shared a deep breath, and put our first aid skills to work. Kneeling on the floor next to our mother, I grabbed a handful of gauze and applied direct pressure to the bleeding gash. John wet a washcloth and gently wiped her face, removing smears of mud and beads of sweat. Mom's typically bouncy fringe-cut hair was pasted tight against her head like a swimming cap. She had gone silent, her face as white as if powdered with Pillsbury flour. "Is she dead?" my brother whispered, tilting toward me. Silent tears rolled down his overheated face. Recalling a scene from a medical show, I placed my hand above my mother's nose and mouth, and there I found her breath. "Not dead yet," I reported, "but we better call 911. Our mother sprang to life as if we'd given her a whiff of smelling salts. "No 911! She sank back into the sofa, her voice hoarse and dry. "At least I'm not dead yet. Just let me rest." And we did, checking that she was still breathing every few minutes. I sat back on the cool tile floor, one hand pressing the gauze against my mother's wound and the other hand holding my brother's hand. I took in the whole of my mother. Sweat-pasted grass clippings all over her body. Her worn white sneakers smeared black and green, and baggy, paint-spattered shorts. A faded yellow Marquette University Dental School t-shirt stretched over the beach ball-shaped lump that would, in several weeks, be my little sister Therese Marie. Sweat rolled down my mother's neck. Her arms hung flaccid at her sides, veins blue and large, and fingers swollen. I thought of my pink plastic diary, the one that Aunt Chris gave me for my 9th birthday, the one with the pages stamped with the days of the week, the one with pages so tiny that all I could fit on one page was the best and the worst of the day. Well, today, and for some time to come, this accident would be the worst. And then my mind, or perhaps it was my soul, lifted out of my body and floated directly across the street. Directly across the street. It entered the home of Mrs. Aurora Bianca. There my spirit was met by an apparition of a perfectly coiffed Mrs. Bianca dressed in her size 6 white pedal pushers, form-fitting baby blue top, and gilded sandals. Since it was Friday, her weekly spa day, Mrs. Bianca was freshly manicured, pedicured, and massaged. Her rich black hair folded elegantly into a stylish French twist. Tiny wisps of curls framed her rosy face. She glowed, eager to take my tattered spirit on a tour of the aspects of her life that I completely envied. We slid past the spotless living room. White sofa, white armchairs, white carpet. White? Really? One after-school peanut butter and jelly snack in our family, and that sofa would look like a Jackson Pollock painting. We passed the twins' bedroom, canopied beds, down comforters, and personalized homework nooks. The twins, Mrs. Bianca's only children, were in my 3rd grade class, Angelina and Ginevra, as stunning as their mother. Girls who sported perfectly matched hairdos every single day of the week. I thank the Holy Spirit that we wore uniforms at Our Lady of Perpetual Motion. The navy jumper, the white blouse, the Peter Pan collar, tights, saddle shoes saved me from wardrobe shame. Since on the weekends, the fashion-conscious twins were always dressed in runway perfection. Our tour continued as Mrs. Bianca led me down a peppermint-scented hallway and with a flair opened a door. "My studio," she announced, her dark eyes sparkling. One room, one whole room only for her. Yes, she was back in college. Yes, she was finishing a degree in architecture. Yes, she was glowing. My eyes drank in the grandeur of the studio, an entire wall tiled in cork and pinned with drawings, paint swatches, and photographs of fancy homes, fancy rooms, all cut from fancy magazines. Her desk, a long chunk of thick glass. A wooden drawing board sat in the center of the desk with rolls of architectural plans stacked on one side and vases clogged with brushes and pencils on the other. Across from the desk, her own personal TV set in front of her own personal treadmill. I wanted this room for my mother. I imagined moving in my mother's stuff, placing Bernadette's portable Singer sewing machine and a pile of Vogue patterns on the glass desk. In the center of the room, my mind positioned a mannequin draped in red satin and then tacked swatches of taffeta and sketches of evening gowns onto that cork wall. I'd found the best, and I wanted that best for my mother. Reluctantly, my soul floated back across the street to my mother's side. For days, I was haunted by these images, the worst and the best. My mother wounded, suffering in sweaty stillness, while directly across the street, a perfectly coiffed, painted, and buffed Mrs. Bianca soared to creative heights in her own private studio. Why? I asked my journal. Why was one life so not like the other? Fighting back tears, I put this question to my Aunt Chris as I watched her hand mix a double batch of brownies. She lifted the chocolate-covered spoon and with 2 beats announced, "Birth control." I grabbed my ever-present pink journal and on a page dedicated to that Friday, in picture-perfect cursive, I wrote, "Best of the day, birth control." And while, as a 9-year-old kid, I had absolutely no idea what birth control was, I was determined to get as much of it as I could possibly find for my poor wounded mother. The next morning, I sprang into action, mindful of my quest. Dad dropped me off at the library on the way to his dental office. I always spent Saturday mornings at the library, but this morning was unique. I was on a hunt. So I made a beeline for the reference desk. There, I unlocked my pink diary, opened it, and slid the treasure before the liquid blue eyes of my favorite librarian, Mrs. Bridget McGee of the Humble Avenue Library Reference Division. This elegant, ginger-haired woman with legs as long as a baby giraffe efficiently reached the card catalog's top drawers, where, due to my lack of height, I always needed her help. "I'm on a mission," I said. I pointed to the well-crafted cursive words on my diary page. "Birth control." Lifting a quizzical eyebrow, the Dublin native asked, "Girl, does your mother know you're here?" "Of course," I said, twisting her meaning to fit my purpose. "It's Saturday morning. Where else would I be?" "Right then." She grabbed a pad of paper and pulled a yellow pencil from her pile of orange hair, the tight rings of curls stylishly secured with a tortoiseshell comb. Ms. McGee navigated the upper level of the card catalog effectively, and with a few moments placed a stack of books on the table in front of me. "Most of these are texts, but I found one I think you'll be fond of." She handed me a biography of a woman named Margaret Sanger. I paged through the textbooks. They all offered the same illustrations, body parts unique to us females: ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, cervical canal, and vagina. I'd seen charts with hearts and lungs and livers and colons, but never a diagram with girl parts. Real news, and nice to know. Certainly a contender for best of the day in my journal. The worst of the day was still screaming in my ears. "You have not found that darn birth control stuff." The science paragraphs on birth control in the textbooks appeared to be all about barriers and blocking, science that landed way beyond my third grade brain. Blocking what? Blocking how? Confused and desperate, I turned to the book about Margaret Sanger, the book that Ms. McGee thought I would like. And there I found pay dirt. It seemed that Margaret Sanger felt the same way about her dear, exhausted mother as I felt about my own wounded one. She wanted her mother to have a softer life, fewer children, and more time for the things she loved. Just like I wanted Mrs. Bianca's life in that darn studio for my mother. I gave up trying to understand that birth control mess once I found Margaret Sanger's story. A story that offered the best argument, an argument that might just jumpstart my mother's own quest for an easier life. I discarded a few books, the worst, and brought the rest of them home. There I found my mother, hands deep in bread dough, at the kitchen table. "Maria Francesca, some stack of books you got there. Aiming for another Girl Scout badge, are we?" "Nope," I said, assuming a newly minted Margaret Sanger rescue smile. "Mom, these are for you." I pushed the pile in front of my mother, who rubbed her floury hands against the green baking apron with Bernadette embroidered across the top. She waded through the pile, examining covers. I reverently lifted the Margaret Sanger book. "Mom, this one is the best." In what seemed like slow motion, she reached for the biography and sliced through the pages of the first chapter. After some time, she raised her head, looked up, wide-eyed. Then she ran her hands slowly over her face and sighed. I do not know if she liked the books. I do not know if she read the books. I do not even know if those books were for her. I do know that the baby, several days away from joining our family, would be her last child. Through the years, I would often look back on my mother's life, a woman who endured 10 pregnancies in 11 years, and recall the day of the accident. I'd remember the vision of Mrs. Bianca's studio, and I would know for sure that what I once so desperately wanted for my mother was the very thing, the very choice I most wanted for myself.